Can you lend me a hand as I walk through this land of confusion? If we give to each other, then there's nothing to take. Let's live life for the moment before it slips away.
Hello, everybody.
Hello,
my name is Jillian Sidoti. Hello, Jeffrey.
How are you, Jillian Sidoti?
I'm doing amazing. Hi, everybody. This is the Last Life Ever Saturday segment where we give you some kind of tip on something in life or business or both. And in this case, today is both. Today, we are talking about embracing change in both life and business. And this is our Saturday segment.
I always love how upbeat that is.
I do too. And you know what? It's the thing is, I love these Saturday segments. And when we used to do them a while ago, because we haven't done one in a long time, we used to do them early in the morning. And that little, intro was inspired by like drinking coffee early in the morning. And now it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. So I feel like I'm off.
Only 2:00. It's only 2:00 in the afternoon for you. No, none of our other people are in Puerto Rico. Not even I'm in Puerto Rico right now. So it is 1:00 in the afternoon here, and maybe even earlier where some of our listeners and viewers are. But
sure.
Regardless, I'm drinking coffee anyway. It's in a solo cup. It's iced coffee, but it's delicious.
So today we're talking about embracing change in business and in life. So perhaps I must embrace the change that the Saturday segment is now later for me. It's not in the morning anymore. It's in the afternoon. But we are going to talk about 6 ways to embrace change. Both Jeff and I have gone through a lot of life changes. I think this is for everybody in the last.
No, I have no life changes. Nothing has changed in my life ever. I woke up one day when I was born, and everything has stayed exactly the same ever since.
Okay, so anyhow, I think a lot of people are in the same situation as Jeff and I, which is that you went through the pandemic and then you woke up one day and everything had changed, whether it was your business, your life, or something else. Well, or something in between. In my case, it was both. For Jeff, it was life.
It was both. Let's be honest. It's both, right? I changed lots of changes.
Yeah. And the thing is, but even pre-pandemic, you had major changes in your life. You've had cancer, you had a career as a lawyer, and then you stopped having a career as a lawyer because of the cancer, and you had to learn to adjust to that and find a new career. So, everybody goes through these changes, and the changes are not always easy. And the thing about nowadays, as opposed to maybe a couple of years ago or a decade ago or even 20 years ago, is that things are so rapidly changing. We've only been introduced to ChatGPT probably for like the last 12 to 18 months. And it has changed things tremendously in the marketplace.
I don't even think it's been that long. I think it's in like 7 or 8 months. It's like really, but it's amazing because it feels like it's been here forever. And like, I was just talking to someone, I don't know, a day or two ago, and they made an entire course in like one day on ChatGPT, and they're selling it online. And I was, and this is not a person that we would think would be making courses or even know what ChatGPT is. And then all of a sudden it was like the common everyday person knows what ChatGPT is, which, by the way, if you don't know what it is, you probably have to check it out because it's changing everything. But change happens constantly, Jillian. I think that's we get to our 6 things in a minute, but like, I think that's the thing that people have to realize is that we're in a world where change is going to keep happening. It's always happened, and it's accelerating because it's exponential growth in technology, communication. I mean, if you just look at things like 30 years ago, we wouldn't be doing this because no one would have had the ability to even watch this. They wouldn't know where to watch. People are watching on their phones right now. They're watching on their computers. They're watching it later on YouTube. None of that stuff existed. Like, smartphones didn't exist. YouTube didn't exist. And for sure, Last Life Ever didn't exist. All that's changed, right? Like, and we're going to continually pivot. And the secret to being successful in life and business is embracing change, which is what we're talking about today. So with that being said, Jillian, let's get to the 6 ways that we think, you can deal with change, or how you can participate and think about change.
Well, you say participate. That's actually our first thing. Is number 1, you can stay informed and participate. And that is instead of just like shutting your eyes and pretending it doesn't exist with things like ChatGPT, it's actually learning how to use things like ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is not the only thing, right? Like, one thing I hear all the time is like, I think autonomous trucks are a terrible idea, or I think autonomous cars are a terrible idea. I think the exact opposite. I think autonomous trucks and cars are the best idea. People say like, well, they could get into accidents. And I hate to break this to all, but human beings have been getting into accidents since the invention of the car.
I think it's really interesting that you bring that up because I don't think I've ever told you this before, but I used to work in the transportation industry that obviously I was in trucking and hired truck drivers for a living. I hired hundreds and hundreds of truck drivers, financed semi trucks. I did all this stuff in the transportation industry over a several year period of time after I got out of law. And so one of the changes I went through is I went to work in this corporate environment, and then I got out of the corporate environment. But the reason I'm not still in the transportation industry is because I believe autonomous trucks are coming. And I looked at the numbers and I thought, the big companies are going to crush the little companies. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. That's just change, right? Some companies win, some companies lose. I mean, the horse and buggy manufacturers lost out to the car manufacturers, but that doesn't mean the world's not better off because of it. And looking at the future, I thought to myself, this is about staying informed, right? Like, this is the point. Like, I looked to the future and I said, I need to change. I need to find something different to do because I'm hiring truck drivers for a living. Like, how am I going to hire truck drivers if I have autonomous trucks? Like I need to do something different. And so I changed and I pivoted and I got more focused on real estate and all the stuff that I do now. And I think that is actually the reason that, I did it was because of the autonomous truck. So it's really interesting you brought up that example.
So what is it?
And I also agree, by the way, they're way better than non-autonomous trucks, right? Like, yes, there will be some accidents, but millions of miles between accidents instead of hundreds of thousands of miles between accidents.
And that's exactly what I say. Yeah. And that's exactly what I say. And then the other argument is like, well, all those people are going to lose jobs, but it's going to create new or different jobs or new or different opportunities, or it's going to make things more efficient.
People might lose jobs, right? But like, that's what I mean. Looking at the future, this is actually one of my really good friends who now lives in Puerto Rico actually told me back when I was working at 7-Eleven. So like 25, 30 years ago, right? He told me he was going to change from being a tool and die guy because he was making really good money at like $100,000 a year in the early, mid 90s, right? As a tool and die person. And he said, I need to do something different because this stuff is going to get automated away. There's going to be less interest in it. And so he went into financial planning and then ultimately insurance and stuff like that. But the thing is, I always remembered that. Like, always look to the future and figure out how to fit into the new future, right? So, yes, people will lose their jobs, but one of the things you can do is stay informed about what's coming and then figure out how to participate in that new future.
And that actually leads us to our second thing, which is to foster a culture of adaptability, right? So if you know that your job is at risk or some way of doing things is at risk, then you need to be able to adapt to whatever the new way of doing things might be. Like, I liken this to people who rejected personal computers. Like, oh, I don't need to learn to use that. Computers are never going to be a household item. And here we are. I think it's really important for people to be able to adapt to changes. And we see this, like, I just don't ever want to be part of that older generation. We see this with older generations, right? They're like, I don't want to change. I don't want to adapt. I want things to stay the same. I want them to be the way they are. And I think the younger generations, millennials, Gen X, and, Gen Z, they have to be ready to be adaptable to change, or they're going to die. And I don't mean physically die. I mean,
they might actually physically die too, but for real, like, yes, you have to feel willing to adapt to whatever's going on. Like that idea is really important. And so, like, inside of your company, that means, you have to be encouraging the people that work with you and work for you to be adaptable. But in your personal life, same thing, right? So 100% agree with that. And I think that kind of brings us to the next point, right? Because, like, the best way to be adaptable is, Jillian?
Well, before it is to invest in continuous learning. But before I move on to that, I just want to go back to foster a culture of adaptability, because the thing is, it's not just about you being adaptable. That's okay. I'm going to be adaptable. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to learn how to work within these, these changes. But how do you do it in an environment where you're a leader? And when I was making this list and thinking about this, I thought, I don't know. I really actually don't know how to do that. So for anybody who's interested, we'll put it in the links below, because this is hard to, type out here. But I found a 2020 article from Forbes that talked about promoting a culture of adaptability. And it was, of course, the number one thing is you have to be flexible yourself. But one of the things that I thought was, like, really, really, really awesome was to tie everything to values and mission. So if you have no values or no mission within your organization, and you and I talk about this all the time with Last Life Ever, you never know which direction to really go in. So being adaptable doesn't matter, because what are you being adaptable for? So I think what I got from that particular Forbes article that talks about 16 different things you can do, number 5 was the one that spoke most to me, which is that, tie everything back to your mission and your values. And if whatever you're doing doesn't tie back to that, then you shouldn't be doing it.
And that actually, I'm glad you bring that up, because I didn't read that article, so sorry about that. I just heard of it now, but I'll check it out. But I actually,
okay. I didn't ask you to. You're like, how are you supposed to know to read it if I didn't tell you?
I didn't read the article I didn't know about. I don't know what I was thinking. I should have been more prepared. But so one of the things I tell my coaching students is that they have to create an internal framework for themselves and stay in line with that integrity. So, like, I always define integrity as when your thoughts and your words and your actions are all in alignment, right? And you're never going to get this perfectly, right? But if you can get close to that and you can figure out what that is, then you can be adaptable without losing your core values, right? Like, because it's one thing to say, oh, I want to be adaptable, but you don't want to be adaptable all the time, right? Like, if something terrible is happening, you don't want to be like, oh, this is the new thing. Like, we now sacrifice virgins to volcanoes. Like, I gotta do that. Like, that doesn't align with my, like, core values. I'm not going to do that no matter what, right? But I can, within that framework of knowing what's important to me, adapt to new things.
Yeah. Hold on. I just really think this is an important point. And so I'm going to put it up on the screen. Don't sacrifice virgins to volcanoes.
Yeah, I mean,
did I spell volcanoes right?
I think it's right. I'm not sure if it has an E or not, but I will say this. I also am against other things like sacrificing virgins to sharks, or or really any kind of sacrifice of virgins or non-virgin people. Like, it doesn't actually matter to me. Their like past sexual experiences are irrelevant. I don't think we should.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. So anyhow, what we're here to tell you today is don't sacrifice virgins or non-virgins. Just don't sacrifice humans. Okay. Moving on. Number 3, invest in continuous education. Now, I'm personally doing this right now. I'm getting another master's degree. I don't know if it's necessary or not. I could probably get this information, elsewhere, but I actually think it's really good for me because not only am I, going to get another degree, but it's keeping me disciplined. So, I'm a little anti-college, even though I have, a JD.
I have
I'm a little
so much college, and I'm really anti-college. I tell people not to go to college, including you, by the way, when you told me you wanted to get a master's degree. And I was like, why? Like, what's the point? But I will say this. I'm saying this as a person who went back to college during the pandemic and got a graduate certificate, during that time. So I obviously recognize the value of coursework. So like the thing about college as opposed to other learning, like you could get the information by watching YouTube videos, right, is it's framed in a way that you're evaluated. And it's really important if you want to learn stuff that there's a mechanism. It's like you and I are in a sort of challenge with a few other people to learn Spanish, right? Like, and we have a mechanism to evaluate whether or not we're successful in doing that. If I didn't have that, I would be less motivated to work on Spanish. And so like creating a framework around your learning is really important. And I think that's what college is really good at, because it kind of forces you to do those things, especially if you want the degree. You have to meet certain criteria to get the degree. But it could be a certification course. It could be signing up for a mastermind or taking an online course. Anything that can create a framework for you that can get you to where you want to be is going to be beneficial. And of course, it's not just college for Jillian, right? Like you have a life coach. I have a life coach. That's a form of learning. We're reading books. We're reading Forbes articles. We're preparing for things like what we're doing right now. And by doing all this stuff, we're constantly learning. And I think
there's so many different ways you can invest in continuous learning. I just happen to like this. And the reason why, I don't know if I even have somebody somewhere to use this master's degree. But the thing is, why I like using it. Oh, you two are the most annoying dogs ever. The reason why I like doing it is because it is a framework. It gives me a metric to work by, and it says you have these things due. You must do them in this amount of time. You have to put it in this format, and you will be evaluated this way. And sometimes in professional kinds of situations, things are not set up that way. We have to be personally responsible and have the discipline, and the only ones holding us accountable are us. And so I kind of like the accountability aspect of the collegiate setting. It's not for everybody, and I'm not saying everybody should do it, but you should definitely invest in continuous learning if you want to be able to embrace change. And it's a great way to, if a change is happening that you're not enjoying, for example, I have found it is a great way to distract you from that annoyance, if you will. And just by way of example,
you went back to college because I was annoying you? Is that what you're trying to tell
us? No, I wasn't. And it wasn't even actually an annoyance. I made a decision. I stick by the decision. That decision was to sell my law firm and stop being a lawyer. I knew I wanted to do that. I knew I didn't want it. I mean, I told you 2 years before, or maybe a year before.
I think you told me like the first day that I met you, almost, that you didn't want to be a lawyer. Like it was literally that soon. Like
no, but
you should get out if you can.
No, I knew in 2018 I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, right? Like I just knew I was burnt out. And by the way, let me just say something to the audience out there about that particular time in my life. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore, despite the fact I was making more money than I could have ever dreamed it possible.
It's not about the money. I'm so happy.
It starts not being about the money. Right. So, and I knew, like, I don't care how much money I'm making. I am miserable. I hate my life. I hate being in the office till 10 o'clock at night. I hate the fact that my kids, think I like work more than I like them, like that. Sometimes
that's true, right?
I do have some teenagers, so
I'm
yeah.
clearly joking, but yeah, I mean, listen, law is not for everyone, but there are some advantages to being a lawyer, right? Like continuous education. You don't have to go to college. Like you're
Well,
forced
yeah,
to
no,
learn, right?
yeah,
Like
right.
there's the
And but
stuff
sometimes
that
it's not the education you want. But the thing is, I sold the law firm, was so happy, I was like, I freed myself of these chains that bind me, and then I was lost. What do I do next? I'm sitting around. I'm not doing anything. So, investing in in continuous learning actually like really fed my brain really and helped that a lot. So the next thing is something I've just started learning about, which is agile project management, which actually started off as a way to create to do software development, but you can actually do this with anything that you're doing, any kind of project you're taking on, or any and it helps you adapt to change when you're in the middle of the project, right? So you're actually you're dividing the work into sprints or cycles, and it's emphasizing like collaboration, communication, and definitely flexibility.
a big
And
part of it is failing fast too, right? Like with
right,
agile, like the goal is to like if it's not going to work, you want to find it out as soon as possible and then either fix it or move on if it can't be fixed.
right,
And that's
right.
where the adaptability comes in, right? That's where like embracing change comes in. When you're doing something agile, you're saying, hey, we're going to figure this out really quick in a short period of time, as fast as possible. And this is very useful as things accelerate. The world is accelerating, change is accelerating. So, yeah, if you haven't studied up on agile project management, I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah, that's actually, and in researching this particular topic, I was like, oh, now I know what I'm going to do for my number 3 and investing in time. I'm going to learn more about agile project management. And it's not the first time I've heard this. One of our guests that was on the Last Life Ever podcast that we haven't released yet, Sandra, she worked for McKinsey, and she talked about agile project management, and she's mentioned it several times to me, and I still haven't gone to like really research it. So now this is my sign to really research that.
And one of the things I did, I don't know if I even ever told you this, Jillian, but like when I first moved to Tennessee, another big life change, like moving from Michigan to Tennessee before I moved to Puerto Rico. But when I did that, I started this tech company, and I got immersed into application development and software development and all this stuff. And these guys were telling me about agile stuff back then. So I was like, this is really fascinating. And this is actually like sort of like a side point, but like sometimes getting into a field that you're not in already will teach you things that you can then cross apply to the stuff you're doing. So one of the things about continuous learning and fostering adaptability and all the stuff we talked about so far is that like when you get into other things and then you can cross apply, it gives you an opportunity to really accelerate your business, your life. If you can apply one concept from something that's working in one field to another field, that can be a very effective way to frankly supercharge your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then the number 5 is actually something that's interwoven in all of these points, which is effective communication. When you want to stay informed and participate, you need to have effective communication. When you want to foster a culture of adaptability, you need to have effective communication. In an agile project management setting, you have to have effective communication. And so, effective communication really helps everybody who's in the change with you to embrace that change. And so, for us, one of our big life changes was moving to Puerto Rico. And so my husband and I had to communicate a lot about that. And I had to communicate with my children about that. And I had to communicate with our friends about that, and, business associates and stuff like that. And when you don't communicate or, let everybody know what's happening or why it's happening and how it's going to happen, you can have some really, really bad feelings, and people think they're being wronged. I mean, especially one of my kids, I had to constantly communicate with him because he was so angry about us moving to Puerto Rico. So I had to talk to him about, like, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this? This is going to happen. Like, he didn't like the change. He didn't want the change. He still doesn't, quite frankly, love the change. He wants to go back to California. But it was like, listen, what can make this better for you? How can we make this better for you? And communicating instead of ignoring, how he was feeling.
Yeah. And effective communication, I mean, you're right. Effective communication applies to all the stuff we talked about, and really to number 6 as well when we get there. But all of these things kind of all cross apply, right? Like, everything we're talking about today, it's not one thing to be effective in your ability to embrace change, right? You need to do all of these things. And frankly, probably we're not even thinking about. There's just a tremendous change is constant. It's like the only thing that doesn't have that never changes is that change is always around. But since it's been accelerating, it's disruptive to ourselves. So that's why you're saying, like, the older generation, like, didn't embrace computers or whatever. But the truth is, the millennials will have the same problem when they're 75 years old, right? Like when people get older, it's really easy to be set in your ways. And so one of the things that I've done as a principal is I've tried to have friends who are much, much younger than me and learn from them. I can benefit them with some of my experience, but I learn as much or more from them than they learn from me, I think, frankly, because I see how they look at the world differently. I see how they utilize technology differently. And by doing that and communicating with them, right, that's where the effective communication comes in. I find that I'm able to learn a lot about what's coming next. And if you're looking forward and thinking about, I mean, that's why I said this stuff is all interrelated, right? Stay informed, participate, invest in learning, but do it through communication. That's the reality. I mean, that you have.
That's such a great point, Jeff. Wow. That's a little eye-opening. I'm gonna really consider that. And then the 6th thing is, and this is something I don't just want to do with my work team, but I am a huge advocate of doing this for children. As a matter of fact, for those of you that don't know, I'm currently teaching math at a school as a volunteer. It's a long story, but I'm a volunteer math teacher. And when I introduced myself to the parents of the children, of the students, one of the things I did was I recommended the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, because they say the most successful children are the grittiest children, are the children who have resilience. And so it's not about being the smartest. It's about having grit. It's about being resilient. And this goes not just for children, but human beings in general. This goes for teams. And so it's really important to build a resilient team. It's difficult to build a resilient team, particularly if you're not resilient yourself. So, and another, a Harvard Business Review article that I read on this particular topic, because again, I totally and completely recommend the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, but this article is a short little article. It's from Harvard Business Review. It's in the comments if you take a look. And it talks about how 7 strategies to build a more resilient team. And one of the big things is showing that you care. Like, do you care about your team? Do you care about the progress that they're making? And are you listening carefully to what your team has to say? And I think this goes the same for your children as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children, so I'll avoid commenting on the parenting aspects because I don't have any real knowledge about that. But I do think a resilient team starts at the top, right? The leader of the team needs to foster a culture of resilience. And you do that by being resilient yourself and by exemplifying what you need other people to do. People are going to, for sure, run into hardships on your team. There's going to be stuff that happens that doesn't go the way that you want, especially when we're dealing with all sorts of change and accelerating pace of change. And when those things happen, you have to be able to stand up to whatever that is. And that's where, like what we were talking about earlier about having that internal framework of values, for Last Life Ever, that's our 5 pillars, right? If it doesn't fit into the 5 pillars, we're not doing it. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world. If it doesn't fit into our 5 pillars, we don't do it, right? And it's the same thing with any team. You get that core value, the vision for where you want your company, where you want your family, where you want your community, your church, whatever organization it is that you're dealing with. You get that vision of where you want it to go and get it as specific as possible. But then once you have that, be flexible, be willing to change and pivot as long as you're heading towards that right goal. Because the thing is, like, there's an analogy I really like. I use it in my book, right? Which is like, if you want to launch like a spaceship to the International Space Station, you don't have to aim at the International Space Station, right? You got to aim towards space. Because once you're up in space, you can get to the International Space Station really easily. Like, the hard part is like going.
You just once you're up there, you can just get on over there.
But it really is that simple. Like 90% of the
just launch yourself into space. That's the hard part. Once you're up there, it's totally easy. No big deal.
It's super easy once you're there, though. Like, I know you don't believe me, but like last time I was in space, I had no trouble navigating once I was there. It's very, very simple. You just put all the effort into getting into orbit, and once you're in orbit, you just make those little adjustments, right? Because you know where you're headed.
Well, see, I've been doing it wrong. Well, listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Next time on the Saturday segment, we are going to talk about coping mechanisms when you're talking about change. Like, what can you do to get through those things? And we're going to specifically talk about some of the things that both Jeff and I are complete experts on, because when I was going through the changes that I was going through, I was on the verge of multiple nervous breakdowns. Really should not do that, especially if you have kids. You should not be having nervous breakdowns because you don't want them to like take on your stress. So there were a bunch of coping mechanisms that we took on. Jeff is the expert on some of these coping mechanisms for sure. And
bro, you're talking about like drinking a lot of alcohol?
I'm not talking about drinking a lot of alcohol. But so join us next time. I'm an expert at
both coping and that. But hey, there is one thing we have to say before we wrap up, Jillian.
Okay.
This is super important. I want to remind everyone, don't sacrifice virgins to volcanoes.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Jillian Sidoti. I couldn't remember my name for a second. I'm Jillian Sidoti, and that is...
Other way, Jillian. Point the other direction. There you go.
That is...
Jeffrey Holst.
And this has been the Last Life Ever Saturday segment. We'll see you all next time.